The subject of what is the appropriate goal for a for-profit company has been studied and debated ever since companies were first formed. How can for-profit companies create value? What kind of value? And for whom? I'm Frank Werner, Associate Professor of Finance at Fordham University in New York City. In this video, we will look at how the goal of the for-profit company evolved from those early times to the latter part of the 20th century. Then, in our next video, we'll look at how that goal has evolved since then and is continuing to evolve. Our story begins in the latter part of the 18th century. In 1769, James Watt, a Scottish inventor and mechanical engineer, patented a steam engine that revolutionized business. Although the first working steam engine had been developed in the 1690s, Watt's version was so much more efficient and powerful that it quickly replaced its predecessors and became the standard for mechanical power. Prior to the development of the Watt steam engine, animal power and human power were still widely used. But very quickly, they were replaced by Watt's new technology, and companies rapidly adopted the new mechanical power, initially in textiles and iron manufacturing, a change we call the Industrial Revolution. Looking back, the development and widespread adoption of the Watt steam engine was as transformational an event at the time as was the development and widespread adoption of the Internet in the 1980s and 1990s. At the same time as Watt's steam engine was transforming business, another Scotsman named Adam Smith was developing ideas that would also significantly change our understanding of how businesses operate. Born in 1723, Smith attended Glasgow University and Oxford before returning to Glasgow University as their first professor of moral philosophy. In 1759, he published his first book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, in which he considered how people could best contribute to the society that was rapidly changing around him. Then, in 1766, after serving as the tutor for a wealthy young duke and taking him on the grand tour of Europe to learn about culture and the fine arts, Smith returned to Britain and began writing the book he is best known for today, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. Commonly known just as The Wealth of Nations, this book extended Smith's beliefs about how people could contribute to society to how the emerging companies of the Industrial Revolution could contribute to society. Actually, there are many other parts to The Wealth of Nations that cover other commercial topics that interested Smith: the division of labor, the origin and use of money, commodities prices, inflation, free trade, and so on. But the topic that people remember most is Smith's analysis and conclusions on the pursuit of self-interest. One particular passage is probably the most well-known. He intends only his own gain, and he is, in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. Now, to understand what Smith was saying, we have to remember that these early Industrial Revolution companies were small and produced simple products. The company that Smith used as his example manufactured straight pins, the kind used to hold together fabric when sewing. Marketing and advertising did not yet exist, so the company had no way to differentiate its products from its competitors. As a result, the company had to accept the going market price for its pins. It was what we today would call a price taker. With no power to raise its prices, the only way to make more money was to lower its costs. Society benefited by getting less expensive products, and with companies striving to be efficient, hence use fewer inputs, there were more resources left available for other companies to use to produce still more products and services. Society also benefited in that companies would deliver the mix of products and services demanded by consumers. If too much of a product was produced, the price would fall, and less efficient producers, who were now losing money, would turn to producing products in greater demand. If too little of a product was produced, the price would rise, encouraging companies to produce more. Today, we understand this as one of the most fundamental relationships in economics, the law of supply and demand. These small industrial revolution companies had little, if any, impact on the environment or on society. So, the only way they could benefit society was through economic efficiency, the practice that came to be called profit maximization by Smith's followers. Now, in Adam Smith's day, profit was simply the additional cash the owner of the business generated. If there was more cash in the owner's purse at the end of the day than at the beginning, it was a profitable day. There was no difference between profit and cash flow. However, by the end of the 19th century, businesses had become much more varied and complex. Quite a few of them employed hundreds, even thousands of people, operated in multiple locations, produced multiple products, and used multiple currencies, with the result that it became more and more difficult to calculate profits. So, business turned to the accounting profession to sort through all the confusion and to develop a set of universal rules for financial statements. But one result was that profits no longer equaled cash flow. So maximizing profits was no longer the same as maximizing the monetary value of the company. In the 20th century, two theoretical developments added to our understanding that accounting profits were no longer the best measure of business value. First, we learned about time value of money. $1 of profits today does not have the same value as $1 of profit yesterday or tomorrow, yet accounting doesn't recognize this. Second, we learned that investors take risk into account when placing a value on a company, yet accounting numbers do not contain the impact of risk. So, finance thinkers began to search for a more comprehensive measure of a company's financial success, one that incorporated all three factors: amount of money, timing of cash flows, and risk. The conclusion was that the value of the company to its investors was the best choice. For a corporation, the total value of the company's common stock in the public markets, since investors would presumably incorporate all three factors as they placed a value on the company's stock. So, from the 1960s to relatively recently, in finance, the goal of the for-profit firm was considered to be maximizing its financial value to its stockholders. For a corporation, this became known as shareholder wealth maximization. Reinforcing this conclusion was the belief that a corporation's shareholders were its owners, the modern equivalent of the founders of those small industrial revolution companies. If shareholders were the company's owners, it was their financial returns that were most important. Every other stakeholder was simply a contributor to the value of the shareholder's investment, no different than the company's factory or the raw materials used in production. So, value is financial value, and it was the shareholders who received that value. Recently, however, finance scholars and business executives have begun to rethink the goal of the for-profit company. We will explore these new and exciting developments in our next video.